Welcome to the Heart-Led Business Show, where compassion meets commerce and leaders lead with love. Join your host, Tom Jacobs, as he delves into the insightful conversations with visionary business leaders who defy the status quo, putting humanity first and profit second. From heartfelt strategies to inspiring stories, this podcast is your compass in the world of conscious capitalism. So buckle up and let your heart guide your business journey.
Peepers, we're on the fabulous Heart-Led Business Show, and we're dishing up a hearty helping of health, hormones, and holistic happiness with our terrific guest, Wonder Woman of Wellness, Dr. Diane Mueller. She's lighting up lives with libidos galore at My Libido Doc. So take a break, buckle up as we dive into the delightful details of her business, bringing in a bonanza of bewitching buzz. Dr. Diane, welcome to the show.
What an intro. I love it. I actually have a Wonder Woman sticker on my computer. So Wonder Woman of Wellness, I'm totally taking that. I love that intro.
Awesome. And that's a really good, I think it's an appropriate name for what you do. And we'll definitely get into that. But before we do, I always like to ask, what is your definition of a heart-led business?
My definition of a heart-led business is a business that is really oriented to purpose as one of the core leading missions. My particular purpose with my business is really helping people understand that pleasure and happiness is not just about desire, but something that we require. So that's one of the things I would say is a purpose-oriented business, but also a business which is connected to spirituality, which is connected to always doing the right thing, which is connected to caring for our staff and treating people with loving kindness, and understanding the complications that come with human existence, right? Understanding when people have a bad day, understanding when people have a bad moment, and really working to approach business and the way I lead, both with my patient care as well as with my leadership, with my team, with compassion, with kindness, understanding, forgiveness, but also with motivation towards our purpose and goal.
That's great. And I hear that a lot about aligning the purpose with the business, and that it really helps kind of drive the entrepreneur to achieve more in that business. Of course, on the flip side of that, there can be struggles with the business side, and we'll definitely get into the business side and what that all looks like as well. But before we do that, why don't you tell us a little bit about your business and what inspired you to start it?
So I have a couple businesses. The main one I'm focusing on these days is my libido business. It's mylibidodoc.com. And this business was really inspired by a few different things, but one was through my own discovery of pleasure and what pleasure could actually do for healing. So I'll give you a story. So in my 20s, I started developing all of these very strange vulvar symptoms, and I was very confused about what they were. I was going to get UTI tested and STD tested, and luckily, everything was negative, which was awesome, but I would be lying awake at night with pain and wouldn't be able to sleep. And nobody could figure out what was going on. It was just this weirdo, type of thing. Well, what I ended up doing, encouraged by my roommate, was I started a masturbation practice. And what I learned with that is with that first night of exploring, I actually had 100% of my pain go away and I could sleep. And then second night, same thing. Third night, same thing. And after a couple weeks of doing this, I was completely pain-free. So that just opened my mind, was one of the first things that opened my mind to the concept of pleasure beyond even sexual pleasure, just pleasure in general as a human. And it's been fascinating to me over the years, all of the things, all the hormones, all of the nervous system inflammation, weight loss, we see all the different things that actually get brought back into balance when we allow our body these times of day to actually explore pleasure in a wide variety of different ways. And yet, it's like, I feel like in functional medicine and holistic medicine, we talk about diet and lifestyle and sleep and, exercise and all of these great things for healthy living. But pleasure is still this missing piece of the conversation. So that's one of the things I feel like most excited about with my work is really helping people understand that we have these pleasure receptors on our body, all throughout our body for a reason. It actually is part of how we balance ourselves and balance our stress. So that's really what I work to do is I work to educate and support people to get their energy, to get their health, their hormones, their relationships all back into balance using a wide variety of methods, but pleasure being, one of the top things.
That's very interesting because I've heard hormone and libido work with a lot of functional medicine docs that I work with, but not the pleasure piece of that. So how does that come into play with your clients?
A lot of different ways. So, one of the things we see, I do work with a lot of postmenopausal and premenopausal, perimenopausal women. So 35 to 55, when women are really going through that change. And I will wind up working with testing hormones and balancing hormones and, hormone replacement therapy and all those great important root causes. But also one of the things we see that makes menopause and that transition period so hard for women and men too, as they go through their andropause, the change in hormones for men period. One of the things we see that makes it so hard is stress. And I always every time I say stress, I'm like, this is so cliche, right? So I like to tell everybody hold on, I'm going someplace because we all know stress is a problem. But right. So stress, what winds up happening when we are stressed going into menopause, oftentimes 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 years of stress, what happens at that time of transition is our adrenal glands, which produce our stress hormones at menopause, are also supposed to take up some of the slack of the ovaries no longer producing hormones. So as the ovaries stop producing hormones, the adrenal glands actually produce a hormone precursor called DHEA. So the adrenals produce this. The DHEA turns into estrogen and testosterone. And if things are going well, we actually can have our adrenal glands, our stress glands, take up some of that slack, from that got, say, lost at menopause. And that transition's a lot easier. Well, most of us are not going into this point of life super easily, right? It's like kids, career, job, house, all the things. And it's just gotten a little out of control sometimes from an overwhelmed perspective. What we see is we can do all sorts of various things to re-regulate our stress response. But one of the most profound ways of actually re-regulating our stress response is through the use of oxytocin, our pleasure hormone. So we actually see that it balances the way the brain is communicating and sending signals to the body about the appropriate level of those stress hormones. So in working with women of this age, I do lab testing to look at all sorts of hormone levels, at the adrenal levels, at thyroid levels, working on the gut and the diet and a wide variety of things because there's so many factors. But the place that I really emphasize that I think, like you said, does get lost oftentimes with a lot of women and males during this time period is really comes down to that balancing of the stress, that balancing of the hormones through pleasure. So many times in life, especially for people that are in long-term monogamous relationships, so many times in life, that's the point where it's the relationship can feel a little stagnant. People become roommates, just pass each other in the night and still have that deep care about each other. But how amazing it is when we can actually start going through and putting together these techniques to actually start falling deeply and passionately love with our long-term
and the added benefit of reducing stress at the same time and living better and healthier too. That's awesome.
Yeah, exactly. And cardiovascular is research on weight loss, on melatonin increase. So we have a improvement in sleep. We see research on cardiovascular improvement. We see research on memory even and oxy. So that's what I'm saying. I feel like it's with all the studies I'm seeing on oxy, it's we have this magic, amazing chemical in our brain that regulates so much of our body. And yet we're not being taught to prioritize and make this even just a small part of our day to help us self-regulate, even just a small part of our week.
So having that date night for sure is mandatory once a week.
Yes, absolutely. And the funny thing about that too is I talk a lot about scheduling the date night and scheduling intimacy escapades. Sometimes that's what I call them. And it's so funny to me and it makes sense, right? Anything that's funny to me around common things I hear also are very logical things. And I understand why people get to where they do because my common thing, right, is well, if I schedule sex, gosh, Dr. D, this is just not spontaneous at all. And true. And oftentimes in the beginning of our relationships, it's we schedule our date night on Friday, when we're meeting somebody. And then we schedule when we're going to see each other again. And we call and text and we schedule. So it was never really spontaneous in the beginning when it was hot and passionate. It's only like when we move in together and start combining our lives and we think it's supposed to happen on accident that we actually stop scheduling it. So in the beginning, it wasn't spontaneously. So we have to just reorient to to that, I think is a helpful thing as well.
Fascinating. And what great work that you're doing too to help so many people. But let's transition a little bit into the business side of running a heart-led business. And one of the reasons I started this podcast was to highlight just what effort needs to go into the business side for a lot of the heart-led business owners that don't really like sales or they don't really like the business side. So how do you balance being a heart-led business and making money?
I was at a business conference this weekend with the Mindshare community that I absolutely love, JJ Virgin's group. And one of the speakers was saying something that I looked up, and it looks like quite a few people say this, but I hadn't heard it said just like this before, which is no money, no mission. And I was like, what a brilliant way of helping people. Because so many times, right, as like those of us that go into business, which is why I think this show is so important, because I think so many people are, starving that are in the medical profession or in the helping profession in any sort of way, because there's this almost this like mentality, right, of like, well, I need to help people. And like, in order to help people, like I got to make my services like, free or super low cost. And it's like bad to charge money and all those things. And I really love this whole thing about no money, no mission, because when I've seen people, for example, try to pay, when I've seen other clinicians try to pay their bills by doing things like keeping their prices super low, what winds up happening is in order to pay their overhead, they have to see maybe 30 people a day. Well, I see most days I see a max of 8 people a day, and that's on a super busy day. And I do that, right? Because it's like, that's because if you do more than that, like the brain doesn't work as well. Like you're not really delivering people like that super high quality service. Plus, this no money, no mission thing is like money that comes in, and charging a good value for what you are giving allows for us to put money back. It's like there's so much money that comes into my practice that I put right back into the world to create free content, to find more people, to go to conferences where I can meet more people that help me with the mission. And it takes money to actually build more things, to put more things into the world. So I really think it's one of the most profound statements that really just clarifies, like if there's not money coming in, there's not energy coming in. All money is, in my mind, is a different form of energy, right? And so that flow of energy is just so essential. So if I'm putting all of this effort out and I don't have any energy coming back in part through the form of money, then I don't have any resources. I don't have any energy. I've drained myself, my resources, I'm depleted, which means I can't help anybody because I don't have any resources left. So it's important that we do charge in order to have this mission to help people, because in order to have a mission, we have to have money. We have to have that energy.
I love that. No money, no mission. That's great. And I prescribe to the selling is serving as well. And, because like you said, if you don't have the resources, you can't help people, put your oxygen mask on first before helping others.
Yes, exactly. And at the end of the day, it's like if a clinician can't afford to pay their bills or get a massage because they're stressed or eat good food to like keep them energized, keep their brain working well, like it's going to work. So I really think we just have to get out of that poverty mentality and realize like money, we can actually take money and also provide real positive, amazing value for people. And unfortunately, those things are like really thought to be like at opposition when it's really truly a both scenario.
Now, I've heard other practitioners that don't have the same mentality say that, but I can't charge a lot because the clientele that I want to serve doesn't make that much money or cannot afford my services. So how do you balance, some people I'm sure can't afford what you offer. How do you balance that and still, making a living?
It's a great question. And so this is where I think like hybrid models can come in really well. So like, for example, one of the things I do is I have my one-on-one type of practice, right? Where people come and they get that one-on-one care. But then I have low price educational programs where people are basically, they come in group format, and it's not medicine, it's education, but I teach them how to get well. And so that's been one of the things I've been able to do, where because in a group format, I'm able able to see a lot more people. It's done through this educational model, not through this medical model. And when I first started that, it was like an unknown as far as like the results I would have with people. And I've been blown away. And I think in some part because it's because it's truly education, not medicine. And people are just learning what they need to do to get well. They also, what's interesting is there's so much more almost like personal responsibility that I've seen where people really take charge in that model of their own health in actually a pretty profound way. And so that's been a way that I've been able to still serve people that have, say, a lower income and still maintain the integrity of needing to serve my mission by bringing enough money into the clinic. So there's a lot of different ways people can do that, but that's like, one way around like, like another thing when you're talking about, okay, well, serving, lower income people. Well, another way is, okay, well, maybe there's a higher price point for certain people and then certain number of people are taken into the clinic every month. Maybe that have to prove income and some of your higher price people help to pay for the lower price people. There's scholarship options, so I think there's a lot of different creative ways to do it, but that's where that would be my advice to people that are really like in that, hey, I want to really serve this type of population, which, is very intense. But of course, we still need to set things up in a way like, okay, well, how can we do that and be creative about still having enough money to come in to actually feel like we can take care of ourselves. So that's the way I have found that works for me.
And that's a really great compromise as well. So, yeah. And, it was interesting what you said also about people taking personal responsibility. And, I hear this all the time as well from especially doctors that are still in the insurance model where the people are coming in, they want the pill, whatever, or the pill potion or powder to make you feel better. And there's no personal responsibility. And yet, our insurance rates are still going up. Our healthcare costs are going up. And because people really aren't taking personal responsibility to get to the root cause of what actually their problem is. Obviously, as part of functional medicine, you go to the root cause of the issues. How else are you able to help people kind of get to the real problem that they're having and take personal responsibility?
I do a lot with the nervous system and reprogramming the mind. I created a system after over 20 years of meditation and Qigong studying, like really deep studying, sometimes 30-day meditation retreats. So I've done a lot down the road of working with the mind. So I have a program where I kind of synthesize all of my studies over the past 2 decades called Hack Your Mind. And what I'm really working to in this program, and I offer it to my one-on-one clients for free. The current price right now for the program is $27 for those that pay for it. So it's still like really, my goal with this program is like empowerment, like make this accessible, right? So it's a really low ticket price point. And I do that because from a standpoint of health, the personal responsibility, like we're talking about, I really find is one of the key, most important things. And what I do in that process is I take people through this program of understanding the subconscious and finding the subconscious thoughts that are actually getting them stuck, that are leading to not taking full responsibility, that are leading to, sometimes victim mentality. And sometimes it's just people that just get stuck in these thought loops of being sick for so long. And just like, it's amazing how many people on a subconscious level actually believe that they're not going to be well or they don't deserve to be well. And that, maybe they won't say that to me consciously, but when they start going through my process, they actually realize like, wow, I have some real self-limiting thoughts that are self-sabotaging. So that's one of the best things that I've seen is like actually working with the mind and those subconscious thoughts and triggers to figure out like how are those subconscious drivers actually preventing people from taking either that full level of responsibility or just preventing them from getting in that neurological state that is really promoting healing.
Yeah, great explanation. Circling back to the business, I don't know how we got off on probably my questions, but have there been times where as a heart-led business, you've had this really wonderful surprise that came from being a heart-led business?
Oh, I mean, I guess I get surprised all the time in life. I've had patients send me gifts, and that's always a sweet thing. I think one of the fun surprises I've had this month is I got invited to be on a 8-part primetime TV show that I just got done filming last week. And so I think that some of the biggest, most fun things things really are being invited to, to speaking events, to speaking here with, people like you, because I really feel like the best thing from a standpoint of being a heart-led business, one of the best things is having the opportunity to turn my voice into one that reaches hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands or more in in a single conversation. And that's what happened just last week, just this filming that is going to go out to 35 million people, where it's like my voice then is, it's just talk about exponential. I'm a very efficient person in my business. Like, how can we take what we're doing and be as efficient as possible? So I think I really nailed it last week on
1
that.
to 3, 35 million. That's pretty amazing.
Yeah,
that's great. Now, on the flip side of that, have there been those moments where you're like, if I were just profit driven, this would be so much easier?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, because I think some of the things, right, in like profit driven, right, scenarios, like I had somebody early on in business coaching tell me, you could be rich or you could be right. And, when a customer sometimes that is not happy with something, and even in heart-led business, sometimes customers have moments where they're not happy about something and they express this. I really always encourage, I really like open, transparent communication. So I much prefer people, if they're not happy about something, to chat about it, right? I'm not a shove it under the rug business or person. So I do appreciate where people bring things up. And in the motto, you can be rich or you can be right, anytime people bring, something up that they're not happy with, of course, my ego gets hurt, right? And so hey, if I could be, right all the time, that would be what my ego would be saying in those moments, is like, well, you're wrong and I'm right. And let me, stick it to you, which is not what I do. Right. But, that's that you can be rich or you can be right. So you can be right. I can lead by my ego and really not hear those people and hear what's underneath whatever they're talking about. Or I can really decide to put my ego aside and really listen, not just to what their, whatever their complaint is, but what truly is beneath it by asking questions. And, if I was just profit first, it would just be like, hey, I don't care. Like, this is what we said. Like, I don't care if you're happy or not. This is our policy and all those types of things, which, sometimes in acute scenarios could be easier, certainly but it certainly is just not from a standpoint of core values, how I run my business or my personal life,
Absolutely. I actually had one of those conversations last night. So and it's so funny. You're like going into the conversation, you get that voicemail, you get that text message, and you're like, and then take a deep breath, go, okay, there's a kernel of truth in everything. Perception is everything, right? So, just take a step back, and then, and it turned out to be a great conversation, and we expanded, some of the business opportunities. So, it all, like, between the head and the heart, when you let that heart kind of lead, it really does work so much better than just going right to the primal instinct of, be rich or right.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, it's good advice early on in my profession.
Well, Diane, it's been just a fascinating conversation of just where you've been and how you're managing having not a profit-led business, having a heart business. And, thanks for sharing that. How can people learn more about you and what you do?
Yeah, the easy thing, if anybody is interested in leading their life with more pleasure, is just to go take my libido quiz at libidoquiz.com. So that's in that quiz, you will take that quiz, and I developed that with the help of a programmer, which is really designed to take a look at all the questions you answer and say, hey, for the uniqueness of you, here are some of the top areas where you might need to get lab tested on, as well as some potential treatment solutions to talk to your doctor about. So it is really designed to be actionable for people that take that quiz. So that's at libidoquiz.com. And then any of the other work I have, my one-on-one care, my ebook, all of that can just be found by going to my main website, which is super easy. It's just mylibido.com.
The great URL to have.
Yes.
Well done.
Thank you.
Diane, thank you so much for sharing your expertise and your wisdom and your heart with us. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having this podcast and the work you do. I think it's such an important work for business owners to really really understands that we can have both, both money, both heart, both happiness, and amazing businesses that truly help the world.
You're
So
welcome.
thank you so much for having me.
And to our listeners, thank you for watching the show today or listening to the show, depending on your platform of choice. We really do appreciate it. And make sure you're checking out what Dr. Mueller has provided. And we've linked all of that up into the show notes, so it makes it super easy. Just go to the show notes, click those links, take that quiz for sure. I think I'm going to be taking that quiz as a 54-year-old, probably with low testosterone. Need to look at that. But anyway, and if you could do what other smart and considerate listeners are doing, and that is giving the show a rating and a review, that really does help spread the word and help more heart-led business owners find some advice that could keep them in business. And until next time, lead with your heart.
You've been listening to the Heart-Led Business Show, hosted by Tom Jacobs. Join us next time for another inspiring journey into the heart of business.